Recording in progress. Okay, so today we're going to cover some of the essential things that you can do as an admin in HelpSpot. This webinar is aimed at all HelpSpot admins, whether you started yesterday or you started 10 years ago. For those of you who are longtime users of HelpSpot, we almost certainly will be covering some familiar ground, but my hope is that everybody here finds something new or interesting that's useful. And again, if you have questions about any aspect of being an admin in HelpSpot, please post them in the chat and we will do our best to answer them as we go. So with no further ado, let me go ahead and I'm going to stop my video. I'm going to share my screen and we are going to get rolling. Okay, so everybody can see my screen and all of you, this should be pretty familiar. This is the admin page in HelpSpot. So we are going to, let me just get my notes here. We're going to go through quite a few different sections. And again, there's so much that you can do here. I can't promise that we're going to cover everything, but I'm going to try to hit some highlights and maybe get you thinking about how you administer HelpSpot in a slightly different way. So I'm going to start with something really basic. I'm going to start with categories. So everybody knows this, I believe, but as a reminder, categories are how you group the different types of requests in HelpSpot. We include some categories when you first start using HelpSpot, but they are completely customizable. You can have as many or as few as you'd like. You can see here, I'm just sharing a screen from the HelpSpot installation that I use when I do demos. So we've got some demo categories here. So when you're thinking about how to organize your HelpSpot instance, one of the things you have to decide is how many categories do I have? What kinds of categories do I have? And some things that you should probably be thinking about if you aren't already when you're thinking about categories. So number one, like trying to decide when should something be a category versus when shouldn't it. So a couple things that you can do with categories as a reminder. So with categories, you can, in addition to just, obviously having different sections appear in the dropdown when you're working on a request, you can do things like create filters or run reports. So if you have certain types of requests where it would be really helpful to quickly either get a report or just see a screen that shows me everything of that kind of request, that's one example of something that might make sense as a category. A really major one that I always tell people to do is think about who needs to be assigned to that type of request. So if you aren't familiar, and you can see here in the sort of add a category screen at the bottom, you can decide who can work on a category. So if you have a small team, it might be that everybody's working on everything because you're all just kind of chipping in. But as your team gets bigger, or if you're already on a bigger team, you almost certainly have some folks who work on some kinds of requests and some folks who work on others. So if you have a certain kind of request in this example, right, I can look up here in my demo. And so maybe for under software, maybe I only have 3 people who work on that, but under HR, I've only got 2 HR specialists. So only 2 people can be assigned to that. So that's another thing that you're going to want to keep in mind when you are trying to figure out, well, when do I need to break this out into a category? So a couple of the things you're going to want to keep in mind when you're thinking about categories. For those of you who don't know or haven't explored this, you can have what we call reporting tags under categories. So in this add a category screen at the bottom here, I'm going to scroll down past some options and you'll see we have reporting tags. And let me actually jump into one of these so you can see what it looks like to have some examples. So reporting tags allow you to get much, if not all of the benefits that you might get out of subcategories, but it all gives you far more flexibility because when you're working inside a request, you can select multiple types of tags. So in this demo example, this is a software category, but I've got things like, oh, is this a Mac problem? Or maybe it's a Mac and an Office problem. And because they're tags, you can select multiple. You can select multiple tags on any given request. And tags, so in that way, they're extremely flexible, but they allow you to still do all the things that you'd want to do with categories for the most part. So you can still filter by them. You can still report on, which requests had which tags, and you can still do automation if you're doing automation with tags. And we'll talk more about automation later. So the combination of categories and tags gives you a ton of flexibility with how you want to organize your requests. And there's really no right or wrong way to do it. It's really up to what makes the most sense for your group. But if you want to ask my opinion, and I don't know if you do or not, but when people ask my opinion, what I tell them is whenever possible, have the smallest number of categories that you possibly can. And so that means, in this example, I've got general sales, support, hardware, but you're going to have your own examples. So for many people, that's going to be determined by, who needs to be assigned to which kind of category, who can do what kind of work. And you might have some other logical sort of groupings that you want to make. But I always advise people have the smallest number you can because you can augment it with tags. So under HR, I can have things like, is this a benefits question or a policy question? You could even get, if you're an HR team, if let's say you had a benefits category, you could get super specific and you could have, well, is this a 401k problem or a question, I should say, or is this a PTO question, or is this a policy question, or anything of, whatever combinations of tags you want to make. So you can still get all that fine-grained reporting, powerful automation, whatever else you would need to do with that tag information without having to create a huge list of categories where you're listing out every single type of thing that you might possibly want to have. So if you haven't taken a fresh look at your categories lately, I would definitely encourage you whenever you have a moment to do so and to think about tags if you're not already taking advantage of them, because they can be really powerful and they can really allow you to simplify. Because part of the goal when I tell people to have the fewest number of categories possible is to make it as easy as possible for your staff members to work inside a HelpSpot. The longer that list of a category is, the more they might sort of wonder, well, is it this kind of request or is it this kind of request? Because sometimes people will write in about two different types of things, right? And so whatever you can do to simplify that, in my opinion, is a really good thing. So I said we were going to be starting with some basic stuff, and this next one's not going to change that necessarily. But as a reminder, one other thing that categories can do is categories can have custom fields. So I'm going to dive into custom fields, which is over here on the left-hand side. And so as a reminder, custom fields allow you to store other types of data in a request in HelpSpot. So we have lots of examples here. It could be something like a drop-down list where maybe you have a controlled list of things. In this HelpSpot demo, we have location as a drop-down list. So is this, which office is this at, or which, site is this at? So drop-down lists are a very popular kind of custom field. You can have text boxes, just a short or a small or a large text field. In this example, we've got order number is one of those. So you can see I've got a text field. Maybe I just need to have a text field alongside my requests in order to write something down, like an order number. Another really popular one are date or date time fields. So in this example, you can see how this works, where this is a date and time combo field where I'm actually selecting what the date is, and then I can even sort of dial this in and go, actually, this is going to be due at 12:30. If you needed to set sort of a date and time that something was due, a really popular example here, if you have a request category that is like projects, or if you have certain categories where there's project-based work, you might want to be able to capture a due date for that project. And so there's other kinds of examples as well, things like checkboxes, number fields, and data that's stored in custom fields can be used throughout HelpSpot. You can use them in filters, you can use them in reports, you can use them alongside automation. And really quick, I'm actually going to jump out of this admin section. For those of you who aren't taking advantage of custom fields, just to show you what they look like, they show up over here on the right-hand side underneath categories. And if you have a category with tags, they'll show up underneath those tags as well, right? And so you can see in this demo example, drop downs, we've got a text box, we've got a date field here. So custom fields, to tie it back into categories, custom fields can be used across all of your categories, or they could be unique to just one or two. So again, that project example I gave, if you have if you have a projects category or a couple different categories that have project work, you can say, I only want that custom field to appear in that category. Or you can say, I want them to appear in all my categories, right? In this example of location, you can see when you make a custom field, this is a drop-down one. So I've got my drop-downs and I could reorder them if I'd like. And then you decide which categories do I want this to be in. And you can even make it a required field. So if you have some piece of data that you want your staff to be able to put in every single time, every single time they start to look at a request, you can do that. Custom fields can also appear on the public support portal that is included with HelpSpot if you want that to happen, and you can see that checkbox right here. So I assume many of you are taking advantage of this, but I'll just show you this very quickly. You can have, HelpSpot includes, of course, a support portal. And as a part of that, you can have categories show up here. In our demo, we have sales and support. And then you can have custom fields show up here as well. So if you're not already taking advantage of this, but you have a need for uh, a form on the public support portal where your customers can go and give you much more information up front than just them describing what the problem is, right? In this example, it's, oh, what kind of request is it? What location am I in? If somebody was just writing into you without giving you that information, oftentimes you might have to write them back and ask, what location are you in? Or, maybe it's something where, people are submitting like an intake form for a project of some kind. If you're, using HelpSpot internally and you need to know, well, what date do you need this by? You could just give them a date, what date do you need this by field? So you can use it in all kinds of creative ways. The final thing I want to say for custom fields, and this is going to go to something I'm not going to have a lot of time to talk about today, but HelpSpot includes something really powerful called Live Lookup, which is a way to connect HelpSpot to any system of record that you have access to. Could be a CRM, could be Active Directory, could be a homegrown database. And it's a really powerful way that many of our customers use to get data out of a system that you already have information about your customers in and bring it into HelpSpot. You can even store information that you're pulling from Live Lookup in a custom field. We definitely have information about that available on our website if you're curious, or if you want to learn more about Live Lookup, please don't hesitate. You can ask us at any time. Our support is always available, not just for when you're having problems, but if you have questions about how to do things, feel free to ask, and we can dive into that in more detail with you if you'd like. Okay, so we've talked about categories and custom fields and tags. We're going to talk next about statuses, which are over here on the left-hand side under organize. So if you are just opening your, if you've got your HelpSpot admin page open in another screen, and while you're watching along here, it might be closed, so it might be here under organize. So statuses represent, for those of you who don't know, who are kind of new and to HelpSpot, statuses ideally should represent the different stages of your support workflow. So there's one that's not listed here that is by default, it's called active. You're going to see it no matter what. But beyond active, you can have as few or as many as you'd like. You can rename the ones that we include by default. So for some folks who are listening, or if you're thinking about this, you might think, actually, I just need one that says active and one that says problem solved, and that's enough, because you're not really using statuses for everything, for other things. But for other folks, you might want things like on hold or pending or waiting for approval or waiting to hear back from customer, or whatever terminology makes sense to you and your team. And if you're looking at this and wondering what kind of statuses should you have, here's what I recommend. And this is not going to sound surprising considering what we talked about with categories, but when in doubt, have the smallest number of statuses possible, because it keeps things easy and clear for your agents. What you don't want is a situation where you get excited about statuses. You're thinking, I'm going to do some interesting things with these. And then people don't know, well, is this this kind of a thing or this kind of a thing? Keep it as small as you can, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have them, right? Because statuses can be extremely useful. Obviously, when you are inside a request in HelpSpot, you can see the status in the upper right, but you can do things like filter, right? So you could create, so in this example, I could create a filter if I had a status called escalated that says, show me all requests that are in this status. So maybe I just want to keep an eye on that as a manager. You can also run reports, right? Maybe it's customer unreachable. Maybe you had a status like that or something similar. You wanted to know, how many requests have we had over the past 2 months where the customer was unreachable? That might tell you something. That might be a good, if you have a large number of those, maybe something is going wrong. So if you have a support workflow where it's possible for things to be waiting for approval or permission or something like that, then again, having a filter that can show you only requests of that particular status could be extremely useful. And remember, you can always change your statuses if you think you have too far or too many. HelpSpot doesn't lock you in to a decision you're making today, right? So if you want to add a status, you can add a status, and then if it turns out it's not great, you can mark it as inactive, right? I can go in here to a status, you click into this, and I could rename it, or I could just say, you know what, make it inactive. So don't feel like, oh, I've got too many statuses. I don't want to get rid of them. You absolutely can change not just statuses, but categories and lots of things in HelpSpot to reflect the fact that your team probably changes over time, right? You might need to add people to HelpSpot over time, or maybe the makeup of your team changes. Maybe you're being asked to do more work or different work, and the kind of things that you're doing need to change. And so HelpSpot can change along with that. Okay, so I'm going to jump really quick to something that is not necessarily only for admins, but for many HelpSpot installations is definitely for admins, and that's reports. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of reports, and if you have questions about any of these, please post them in the chat, or feel free to reach out to us later. There's a lot that you can do with reports, but I want to show folks reports for two reasons. Number one, like I said, in most of our customers, reports are mainly for admins, even though it doesn't have to be that way. But also, when I talk to a lot of our customers, I'm often surprised how many of them haven't really explored reports. So just to give you a quick view of what's going on here, when you first go into it, it shows you a today board. And because I'm in a demo, well, there's not a lot of activity happening today. So you would normally see things happening on this page here. But I want to show you a couple different kinds of reports to give you to sort of give you an overview of the kinds of things you can get reports, just to get you thinking about, oh, this might be really useful or really interesting for me. So I'm going to pick a month with some data. And this is just a really classic, how many requests did I get over a certain period of time, right? This could be a very simple report. So in this example, I'm seeing data from January of last year, and I can see, okay, I've got this graph. I got, most days I don't get a ton of requests, but all of a sudden on this Monday, I got a whole bunch. That might be interesting for me to know. And this can be really, really simple. But as you might expect with HelpSpot, there's a lot of customizability, a lot of power hidden in these options. So this is showing me grouped by day. But what if I wanted to view this data by hour of day? So now I'm seeing a graph that's showing me throughout, averaged out over the course of the month. I can see, actually not averaged, summed up over the course of the month. I didn't get a lot of requests ever at 3 a.m., which might make sense, but I get a nice little burst at 5 a.m. And then it's a nice little burst again just before midday, when I assume people go to lunch and we get a little afternoon break. Your data is going to look different than this, of course. But this might be really useful if you're trying to figure out, when do I need to staff support? Or maybe you want to see this by day of the week, and you can see interesting trends. Like, I get a lot of requests on Monday, hardly anybody on Thursday. What's going on that, right? That could also be useful to do. But you can group these requests in all kinds of ways. Obviously, as you might expect, by category. So I can see how many types of requests I'm getting, hardware in this case versus prospect. I can group it by customer if you want to see, if you have particular customers who are high volume and you want to represent that in some way. Maybe I want to see it by who it's assigned to, right? So if I'm trying to understand workloads over the month, I can see, I only had 4. Apparently, I'm not doing a lot of requests. My poor boss Ian, who's on the call with me, I gave him 25. It's a really busy month for Ian. Sorry, Ian. So you can see all kinds of ways that you can take what is a very simple report and then group it in interesting ways to view data, that you might not have thought you had access to. And then on top of that, you have the ability then to filter this down. So, in this example, if you've ever used filters in HelpSpot, which I'm assuming many, if not all of you have, this interface is going to look familiar. And so in this example, I'm grouping by user for the month of January last year, and it's showing me everything that's open. But what if I just want to do it by a particular category? So I'm just going to say, show me this data just in this one category. And all of a sudden, this data looks extremely different, right? So just like filters, you can stack as many of these as you want. So you can really dig deep here and get data that hopefully gives you actionable information for trying to, run your team or run your operation. And so it's really nice to be able to see this data. But what's true about all of our reports is not only can you see this graph, but you can export it as a CSV. So you can take it out and put it into Google Sheets or Excel or any other spreadsheet app that you're using. You can view the data here along with some stats over on the right-hand side. And this is a really nice feature, you can save it for later, right? So if you have done the work of creating this custom report that you think you're going to want to come back and run on a regular basis, you can save it. And then you can even have reports automatically emailed on a daily, monthly, weekly, or quarterly interval. So you could set up a report once, if you have a monthly report you want to run, you could set all that up and say, every 30 days, and I'm going to send it to me. And, I'm also going to send it to my guy, Ian. and maybe you also need to send it to somebody outside of HelpSpot. I'm sorry, outside of your company, and you can do that. So this is true of all the reports in HelpSpot, and this can be a really nice way to make sure that if you are doing reports, you don't have to come in here and remember, well, which settings did I do on that particular time? So that's a look at requests over time. We have lots of other really popular reports, things like pick again a month with some data, speed reports. So now this graph's getting more complex. It's showing me volume versus speed, like how long did it take an actual staff member, not an auto reply, nothing like that, but how long did it take an actual staff member to reply on any given day? And you can see volume versus speed. You can do the same thing with resolution speed, right? So how long did it take us to actually resolve that request? And then again, I can group this not just by day of the month or whatever time period I've chosen, but maybe by hour of the day. So I can see, when our speed is dipping or rising, or maybe I want to do it by category. So I can see which categories we have more volume in, but also maybe take less time versus other ones like this one here. Not a lot of volume, but it takes a lot of time. Is that because it's complex? Is that because there's a breakdown somewhere? I'm not sure, but that might give you some insight. That's a place to start digging and try to figure out what's going on. So there's lots of stuff you can do with reports. I kind of wanted to just give you an overview in case you're not familiar. And again, feel free to ask questions, whether it's now or later. We would be happy to answer any questions you might have about reports. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the admin side. Just wanted to show you reports again, like I said, because it's something that most admins have to not just have to do, but want to do. So let's just talk about really basic stuff, right? So adding a staff member can be really straightforward in HelpSpot, right? You got to make sure they have a first name, last name, email, password, and that can be it. But there's an option here that I want to dive into a little bit, the idea of permission groups. So you can actually customize what those permission groups do over here on the left-hand side under Organize. I'm going to click in and go in there. And so HelpSpot ships with permission groups by default, but as you might expect, you can change them up, you can rename them. So whatever we ship with, don't feel like you have to keep it that way if you don't want to. And so permission groups allow you to define what different groups of staff members have access to inside of HelpSpot. So aside from the admin level, which you can't change, and I'm assuming everybody on this call is a part of it because that's the only way you can get to the admin page. HelpSpot, like I said, has these different groups here, and they can do lots of things, right? So for some of you, permission groups are merely a way to control who can get to reports or who can manage knowledge books. But aside from that, maybe you don't need a whole bunch, right? You've got everybody can basically do everything else. But if you have bigger teams or if you have certain kinds of teams where you need to be able to restrict staff members to certain categories or maybe even just view their own requests, you can do that. So if I scroll down here, you can do things like, do I want to make sure that this person can only view their own requests? So if you're trying to run a large support operation and maybe you don't need people going to see other people's requests, or if you are trying to have multiple groups sharing one HelpSpot installation, you can use these permissions to control what they can see. So there's lots of things that you can do with permission groups, and if you've never taken a look at it before, I would definitely recommend coming in here and honestly even just making sure that the different staff members you've added, that they have the permission group that you would expect that they have. Okay, next I want to dive into email. So I'm assuming that everybody on this call has at least one mailbox connected to HelpSpot, but you might not know some of the details, some of the options. So I kind of want to dive in a little bit. So first of all, if you aren't aware, HelpSpot can support multiple mailboxes. So and you can see here in this demo, I've only got one that's added here, but I have the ability to add other mailboxes. We support Microsoft 365 and Google, of course, and you actually have a really easy way to connect to them. And we use secure APIs to grab email from those accounts that are connected. But if you have an email account hosted elsewhere, we support IMAP. And so for any mailbox that's connected to HelpSpot, you have options that you might not be aware of. So I'm going to dive in here to this just to kind of show you some of how this works a little bit. So down here in these options, you can do things like have a default category. So if you are, maybe you've got, maybe you're an HR team and you've got, benefits at company name in addition to HR at company name, and you just want everything that's coming in to benefits at company name to automatically go to the benefits category, you could totally do that. You can also, if you have multiple mailboxes, you can enable auto reply on a per mailbox level. So depending on how you run your support operation, you might want people to receive an automatic reply saying, thanks for your inquiry. We've received it. It's been reviewed. But then you have other emails where you might not want to be the case. So you have that kind of control. There's also email templates, which I want to dive into in a bit. But the last thing I want to show you that you might not be aware of when you're thinking about how you've got email connected to HelpSpot, over on the left-hand side under custom, oh, no, I got to make sure I find it here. Sorry about this. Under settings, thank you, email integration. So here's where you have extra settings for email. And here's where you can do some really interesting things. I'm going to scroll down here. So things like this option here, reopening close requests before. So you can customize how many days a request can be closed before. Actually, let me reword this and explain it. So the way that most of you, I bet, have HelpSpot set up is once you close a request, if somebody replies to it, it reopens that request. And for some folks, that's exactly how you want your HelpSpot to work. But for other folks, you may not. So you can come here and you can tweak this, you can customize this. So I believe the default is 30 days, if I had to remember correctly. But you can do things like, actually, 30 days is too long. If they're replying to, if somebody's replying to this and it's been 30 days, they're probably accidentally replying to it about something else entirely. So maybe I just want that to be 5 days or 1 day, or maybe never, or maybe always, depending on the nature of your support operation. So if that's something that's always kind of baffled your team a little bit, you're wondering, oh, they reopened it accidentally, and now we got the set, this should have been a separate request. Instead, it's a continuation. You can come in and you can tweak that setting, which is really nice. There's another setting here that is also really useful for folks who don't know. And I should note that this setting is only for non-Google mailboxes. So this setting does not really apply to Google mailboxes, but you can decide if replies to notification emails are public. So when a staff member replies to, is assigned to a request or is mentioned in a request, oftentimes people have it set up where they're getting an email notification. And so if this setting is turned on, the behavior of HelpSpot will be, if that staff member replies to it, it will be forwarded through HelpSpot to the customer as a public note. If that's something that you don't want, then you can turn this off, and instead it'll be a private note. So that way, if somebody, if you get a notification about a request, this is turned off, and you just reply to that email because you're on the go, you got the notification on your phone, it'll only be added as a private note. And then when you either open up the HelpSpot app, or if you get back to your computer and then you go to the request, you'll see that note there, and then you can write whatever public note you want to write. So you can control that behavior, which is something that you might not have been aware of. There's other settings here that could be interesting for you depending on what you're trying to do. You can have, if you have explicit emails that are just always coming in, even though they're spam, or and you always want to mark them as spam, you can add them to a deny list. Or maybe there are things that come in and they keep getting tripped up by the spam filter. You can add it to the allow list. You can tweak attachment sizes. There's all kinds of options here. And again, if you have questions about any of these, please feel free to ask us either in the chat or later on. We'd be happy to help walk through all of these. Okay, I mentioned this before. I want to talk about email templates. So let's go back to email mailboxes. I'm going to dive in down here at the bottom. So email templates in HelpSpot can be system-wide, or you can have specific templates for specific mailboxes. So what do we mean by email templates? This is the text and formatting for emails that HelpSpot sends out. Emails like public notes to customers, like you see here, or external notes, request that's created by a portal form, as you see here. Could be a reminder, could be the auto reply. And in the settings for each mailbox, you can tweak what it looks like on a per mailbox basis. So maybe if you have multiple teams who are all sharing one HelpSpot installation, but they have different email addresses, you could have different things that are here. I'm going to go ahead and view this so you can see. This kind of template probably looks pretty familiar to everybody. But maybe you want it to say something specific, like, your request has been received. It has been received and is being reviewed by our financial team, or our HR team, or our IT team, or whatever else that you want to say. So you can customize these templates on a per mailbox basis, or you can come over here to email templates, which is under the customize setting on the left-hand side here, customize grouping, I should say, on the left-hand side here. And you can modify quite a few different email templates. And if you've ever used responses where you have what we call placeholders, so those are placeholders for all kinds of data in HelpSpot, things like the name of the person who created the ticket, custom fields, etc. You can also use those here when you are customizing what kind of email template you want to have. So if I look here, you can see we've got these double brackets, which if you've never seen this indicates a placeholder, or what we also call a template tag. So in this case, we want to say there's the reply above, there's the message, but you could also have things like the customer first name, customer last name. If you're trying to set up an auto reply, you can include the category, maybe the date it was opened. If you want to say which staff member has been assigned to your request, if you're trying to provide a really personal level of support, you could do that as well. So there's lots of things that we have here and options, lots of ways that you can customize these templates. And if you've either never taken a look at these, or if you haven't taken a look at them in a long time, I would definitely encourage you to do that, because there might be small things that maybe you wish you could change and you didn't realize you could. So, and again, that's over here in admin on the left-hand side under customize, under email templates. Okay, so next I want to talk about automation. So in the admin, again, I'm on the admin page. On the left-hand side here under triggers and rules, you'll see we have three kinds of automation in HelpSpot. For those of you who aren't aware, we have triggers, automation rules, and mail rules. So I'm going to sort of briefly go over all of them and then show you some examples as well. And again, if you have questions about specific things you want to do with automation, please don't hesitate to ask. So triggers watch for changes in real time and then perform actions instantly based on those changes. So a classic example, and if you've started using HelpSpot recently, if you've ever had a demo with me, this will be familiar to you. But a classic example is using a trigger to customize how I'm sorry, my mind went blank there for a second. To customize what happens when a request is marked as urgent. So if I come in here and say, okay, so triggers have names, and then you're saying when a request is updated, if all of the following conditions are met, in this case, it's open, great. And I'm going to say urgent C now is urgent. So basically this means whenever a request is marked as urgent, I want to do something. And so one thing I might want to do is maybe I want to send an email notification to the person it's assigned to. And I can use those placeholders to, to insert my text here. I could say things like, please, please take a look at this immediately. Maybe I just want to give them some basic information about this request. Hey, as a reminder, this is open and urgent. Please work on it. But I can also do things like, maybe I also, if it's marked as urgent, maybe I want to email the customer because we know it's urgent. And you could use language like, thank you for your request. We know how important this is to you. Our team is working on it, et cetera, et cetera. That way they don't feel like it is sort of lost. They know, this is urgent and they're working on it correctly. And maybe in addition to sending them an email notification to the assigned staffer, maybe I also want to subscribe. Maybe I'm going to subscribe Ian since he's my boss, and I want to make sure he knows about all urgent requests. So if you're not familiar with subscribing to a request doesn't mean that you're assigned to it, but it means that you're going to get all notifications about it. So this can be really useful in situations where something important's happening and maybe you don't need to be doing the work, but you want to stay on top of the work without having to remember to go look at it or without having to ask your team about it all the time. You can subscribe to it. So in this case, right, this is a great example. If it's urgent, I want to send an email notification to the person it's assigned to, and then I'm going to email the customer back to thank them for their patience. And I'm also going to make sure the boss is subscribed. So I can add that one trigger, and all of a sudden, what is just a mark as urgent button inside of HelpSpot is now much more customizable, right? So that's a really classic example of what to use a trigger for. So automation rules run on a set schedule. You'll see that down here, run schedule. It could be as frequently as every minute. It could be as infrequently as monthly. And these are used to do things like escalate requests, notify staff and customers, change assignments, do all kinds of interesting things. So what's a good example of that? So we could use the example of tie it into what we just did. So maybe you want, we'll just do we'll say a twice daily kind of check here for requests that are, and what's really interesting, first of all, there's tons of options here, as you might expect. Things like, oh, I want to have this set based off of a custom field value or something like that. But I love to show this off because I think it's really interesting and unique. You can do date and time math. So you could have something like, if something, let's see, has been, maybe it's minutes since opened and you want to say greater, and we've got a calculator here. So maybe it's 4 hours. Maybe if it's been 4 hours and something is still open for you, that means it needs to be urgent, right? And you want to run that schedule twice a day, but so maybe 4 hours. Actually, we'll just run this every 5 minutes then, right? So you can then do things like, oh, actually, I want to mark it as urgent. So then that could tie in with that trigger that we just made. Or maybe what you actually want to do is maybe you just want to get like an email report, basically, right? It's what we call email table of results. So you can do things like, oh, everything that's been, if it's still open and it's been more than 4 minutes, I want to know about it. I could do that. What I actually used to do is so before I worked here at HelpSpot, I on multiple occasions ran help desks for universities, and I used to have this setting I love called minutes since last public update. So this means how many minutes has it been since the last time that either we emailed the customer or the customer emailed us. And so I used to have this set up, and for me, it was 2 days was a good marker. So, and I would run this every day. And so what this automation rule that I've created here means is every morning when I came in, I would have an email waiting for me that had a table. And in that table, it listed out all the requests where it had been more than 2 days since somebody did something, whether we wrote to them or they wrote to us. And when I ran a help desk, for me, that indicated, oh, 2 days? What's going on? Why haven't we given them an update? Why haven't they gotten back to us? Is something stuck? Is there a problem? And maybe that doesn't apply to all your requests, right? Maybe that's just certain kinds of requests. So you can stack this with categories, and you can even do things like, oh, it's not. Like if you have a project category, we'll pretend other is project here. You could say, don't apply this to the project category because project categories they're longer running. I don't need to worry about that, right? So there's all kinds of ways that you can use the combination of triggers and automation rules to sort of give things superpowers in HelpSpot, right? Like I did with the Marcus Urgent button, but also to stay on top of whether they're formally written SLAs, whether they are just sort of informal gut feelings that you have about like, hey, that's taking a little too long. You can use these automation rules in HelpSpot to make it easier for you. And when I had this basically almost exactly same automation rule running when I used to work in customer support and when I ran help desks, when I came in every morning, in addition to whatever fires I was going to put out because of the emergencies that I was dealing with that morning, this email was kind of my go-to. It was my, okay, in addition to everything else, these are the ones that are sitting, and I want to go around and talk to this person and that person to try to figure out what is going on. The last kind of automation I want to show you are mail rules. So mail rules apply to new request emails only, but they can be used to look for conditions about that email and then do things with it. And what do I mean by that? So let me show you some actual examples. So HelpSpot can do things like it can look at who the email is sent from. And maybe you have emails coming, maybe you're, if you are supporting, maybe you're B2B and you're supporting other businesses and you want for emails that come from people that have a particular domain, right? So, if maybe we're one of your customers, and you're looking for anything that contains userscape.com, right? Because that's our email addresses here because Userscape makes HelpSpot. And I know that everything that comes from Userscape, I want to put it in a particular category, or I want to set a status or change a custom field or something like that. You could do that. You can also do things like look at the subject line, and I'm going to go here, switch all to any. So, and oftentimes I see this being useful when I talk to our HR customers as an example. So I use them as a good example here. So I could say, you know what? I know that if someone somewhere in the subject or the email body just says 401k, I want to set the category to something, or maybe I also, want to set a custom field, or maybe it's just set a tag, right? So yeah, I'm going to set it to human resources, and I still want to go in the inbox, but I'm also under human resources. I'm going to set this to, maybe yours says 401k instead of just benefits, right? So you can have HelpSpot look at incoming requests and automatically set things about it so that whether they go directly to somebody or maybe they just go into the inbox, your team is already knows, they already have more information that can be readily available. They don't have to go and manually set that. Maybe this, you can use this in ways to route emails to particular people. You can do all kinds of creative things with mail lists. And again, I would always say test it out. And then if you need to, you can always delete them and get rid of them after the fact. So you can experiment. And if it doesn't work for you, you can remove them. Okay, we've got about 18 minutes left. And that is, there's still quite a bit of things I didn't even talk about much. There's things like secondary portals and portal templates and how ways that you can customize the look of portals. But what I want to do for now, actually, if anybody has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and look at the chat. And just want to see, does anybody have any questions? So let me see what we got. I see Ian has been answering a few questions directly, which is great. Okay. So I'll just open the floor, whether you want to, ask in chat or, just sort of unmute and ask, does anybody have any questions for us?
I'm sorry, could I ask you a question?
Of course.
My name is Haider. I work for Family Tree DNA. My question is, can you increase the filter limit when you create a report? When you generate a filter?
The filter limit, what do you mean by that?
So currently when you create a filter in reports, or when you create a filter, it only shows up to 200 of these tickets.
That's a good question. Ian, do you have any thoughts on that one? Yeah, Ian might have stepped away for a second. Yeah, we can definitely follow up with you on that one for sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Dave, there's a global setting for that.
I knew you'd know the answer. All right, where am I looking, Ian?
I think it's in there. I didn't get a chance to look quick.
Oh, filters right here. There's
There
max results per page. Yeah, so you can you can decide. You can also, if you need to, so you can customize that. You can, if you need to determine how many days are affected by filters, you can also do that as well.
Yeah, so there's not a per filter setting for it though. It is just the one global setting.
So it's from system and then
it's sorry, admin settings system, and then under this filters subsection here, it should say under max results to display per page.
Give me one second. Yes, I got it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
I knew Ian would know. Okay, I see. Let's see. We got a couple here. Jaspel asked, how do you remove staff who've been marked as inactive? Excellent question. So if I go here to staff, I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to pick on Ian for now. If I scroll all the way down to the bottom, I can say I can make him inactive. Actually, I don't want to do it to Ian. Let's pick somebody else because that might mess something up. Actually, I'll go ahead and I'll pick on another. This is actually a fake employee here, so this isn't going to matter. So I'm going to go ahead and say make inactive. And then I click OK, and now they are inactive. And if I wanted to go ahead and recover that, I can go up here to where it says show inactive staff. And I could then, you can see I've got two here. I could go click on Sarah, and then I could go and restore, which is in the lower right. And so it says, do I want to restore? I say yes. And now they are added back to the list of staff.
I think they might be asking if there's a way to actually like permanently delete those inactive staff members.
Oh, I see. How do you remove?
Yep. And you can't do that because, yeah, like the second part of the question gets to, it would then break all the relations to that user for everything they've ever done in the system. And so HelpSpot wants to preserve that history. But if you have somebody you really need to get out of there, I mean, you can like edit the user still. So you could like change their name and change their email and change that criteria, all the different elements about them, but you can't actually delete them per se.
Yeah. And as Karen just pointed out in the chat, if a staff person has tickets assigned to them when you mark them as inactive, those tickets revert back to the inbox.
I have a question. My name is
Sure.
Rosa. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good. So I get a lot of requests that come into, the HelpSpot ticket system, and, I have a staff that's taking care of those tickets. Is there any way without having to go and, because I get multiple requests on the same issue, without having to go and search to see if there's another ticket out there? Is there any type of filter or anything that I can do that can alert me without having to make those extra steps? That there could be an open ticket already for that request?
For that request, like
Not
for that, oh, go ahead,
Yeah, I was just gonna say not for that it would know that it's the same request exactly, but when you go into a request, uh like if you go, yeah, if Dave goes into a
Yeah.
request here, up at the top right there in history search,
Mhm.
there will actually be a number next to the words history search if that person has, more than one open request currently. So if they were to have 2 or 3 open requests,
Yes, you
there you
can
go.
see
So
right here.
perfect. So you can see it shows the number there. So that's going to be your hint that like, oh, this person has multiple requests. And obviously often that will mean, they've sent in something else on the same request. Although of course not always, it might just be 2 unrelated requests, but pretty common. It'll be the same request. Then you could just either handle them or merge them or whatever you want to do.
Right, and I do that, but I have to physically go into each ticket. So I get a large amount of ticket volume that's coming in. So I'm trying to avoid to having to open up every single one. You know what I mean? To see
Yeah.
if there's a
Sure.
history search. So like, for instance, like I'll have a description. And the description's the same when they're responding, right? So I was wondering if there was any way to try to filter that without me having to open up each ticket, is what I'm saying.
Well, one thing you could do is you can control, if you have either customer as a column, like, so
Right.
whether it's a filter, you could sort of be sorting by customer. And if I go here to options, I believe I can even group by customer email. So if I save this, you'll see it actually breaks it up. So you can see under each email, oh, Dave's got 3. So
What
you can
about in the
customize
description? Is there any way that you could filter that field?
by description.
Not by the description, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, not unless because I mean they might be different in terms of what they've actually written, even though they're related to the same thing, right? Or
Right.
things like that. So that would probably be a little bit tricky, but it does show you that in the grid of the filter. So it might be that if you group
Yeah,
them together by like customer name, for example, or email as
Mhm.
Dave showed, then
yeah,
it's
you can
gonna
even
be
order, but
very obvious because they'll be next to each other.
Right.
you can even order by email. So if they do, so if they have the by subject line, so you can do a couple different things there. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you for that.
no problem, no problem. Let's
I'll do
see.
something similar, but I have a report that has quite a few number of tags that help me group things together. And so I can see, if there's something very common about a certain question, my team will put the associated tags on there. And so when I'm opening up that report, I often see
Yeah.
like 3 or 4 questions might be the same thing. And you can merge them all together if you know
yeah.
that they are similar.
Yep, great point, Lauren.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can merge right from here. So if it's obvious that they're the same thing, you can just check those off and then merge without having to go into each ticket. And then while we have Lauren,
Yeah, I was
Dave,
going to say
you
she
a
had a question about
about live
Lauren.
lookup, multiple live
Yeah.
lookups.
Yep. So you absolutely can have multiple live lookup sources. So if I go in here on admin, under settings, and then live lookup, we actually, yeah. So actually, Ian, you could probably maybe explain this a bit better about how to actually add multiple sources.
Yeah, so if you already have one source, Lauren, I don't know if you were like aware of how that was originally configured, but basically there's going to be a script that someone on your team has created at some point, and that HelpSpot connects to that script and runs queries against it. And so it sounds like right now it's just querying a single database, but you could duplicate that script and modify it so that a second version of that script goes against a second database. And then you would just enter that second one here where Dave's showing in live
Yeah.
lookup search. And then Dave, if you go back to into a request quick,
Yeah.
then we can see here when you go to live lookup, there's actually a drop down there, and you'd be able to drop down to select that secondary database instead. So that would be one way to do it. Another
You
way to
can-
do it would be to modify the live lookup connection you already have and just have it connect to both databases every time and merge that data together before it sends it to HelpSpot and then send that to HelpSpot. So we do have customers do it both ways. Depends a little bit on like, if these are related items and like the one database is that, just adding more color to the items in the first database, then you might want to do that second way I talked about, where you kind of just merge the two databases information together. But if they're just like totally unrelated databases, then you might want to do the two separate live lookup scripts. And that's definitely something that our support team could help you out with, and figuring out what's where and helping you with how to get that done.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And Ian, related to live lookup, Ryan asked, can you run a second live lookup or basically the next lookup after that if it doesn't return results?
Like it won't automatically do that if you do the two separate live lookup paths where they're just two separate live lookups to HelpSpot. But so in that scenario where you're trying to accomplish that, normally you would just have one live lookup script. That live lookup script is going to go against the first database. If it doesn't find anything, then in your logic in there in the live lookup code, you would then query that second database. And if that has results, then go ahead and return those. So that's normally how you would handle that.
Yeah, Ryan, hopefully that answered your question there. Janine asked, says that they've had staffers create multiple templates for their personal use. And by templates, I assume you mean responses. And then when they leave the company, is there a way to make those person's templates inactive at one time without having to go item by item? I don't
think so right
there is.
now.
Yeah.
But we could help you with that as a support request, probably to do it as like a batch as a support operation for you. So if it's a HelpSpot cloud, if you're on HelpSpot cloud, if they have like a bunch of them in there and it's 100 of them and it's kind of a burdensome amount to go through, we could help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you ever have any questions like that, Janine, you could, like Ian said, you could send us a request. If you have specific people who are like, I just want to get rid of responses for the following people, we can help you with that almost certainly. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. If anybody else has any other questions, it could be something we talked about today. It could be something we didn't talk about.
There was one higher up that I think we missed.
Did I miss that? I'm sorry.
Courtney, where she asked if we could show how to put the custom fields on the request form.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go in here to admin, and then I'm going to click on custom fields on the left-hand side here. So I'm going to go ahead. I'll just make a fresh custom field here. So I'm going to pick what kind of field I want. So in this case, I'm going to pick the predefined list, which is this drop-down list. And then I'm going to click go to step 2. So we'll call this name. We're going to call this Dave's test field. This is very scientific. And option 1 is HelpSpot. This is great. And option 2 is email. This list makes no sense, but I just want to show you. And so once you scroll down here, you'll see you've got, first of all, which categories do I want to be visible in? And then you decide, do I want this to be required? And then do I want to show this field on the public request form? So I'm going to go ahead and hit create this field after checking that off. And then I'm going to go ahead and open this up here. And now, so how would I categorize this request? Sales. Now I've got my old one I had before, location. I've also have Dave's test field. So it's basically as simple as that to determine, to add a custom field here to the support portal.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think I missed the step of going to the site and then the create a request. So thanks for showing that. That's
no
perfect.
problem. No problem. All right. Let's see. Did we get Michael, I think, just asked a question here. wants to know if you can find past ticket information from a certain category that has been closed, such as ticket numbers, email addresses, names for the last 2 years. Can this be recovered and put into a report? So you should absolutely be able to get a report that way. But I think there's a couple ways you could do this. So yes, you should be able to get a report. So you want ticket numbers as well. Okay, so actually I'm going to show you a little sort of a little secret, a little trick here. So one thing that you can do with filters is, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to click on any one of these here. You can get as a filter a CSV export, which will just give you the columns that, like as you see here, and each one of these will be a row, and that's in that CSV, which you can then bring into any spreadsheet. So if you need a report that includes ticket numbers and other things like that, Michael, in this case, I would go ahead and actually I'll just go ahead and create it on the fly here. So create a filter. So let's say it is closed. And let's see here. We're just going to say, show me everything. Oh, did you say for a particular category? Sure. We'll pick a category. And we'll say it's support, and I'm going to call this closed requests. And I'm going to go ahead and let's see, under options, I want to make sure that all the information I want is here in this column. So I've got customer, but I also want to make sure I add email, and maybe I don't care about age. That's fine. Maybe I also want something like the last public note, like what was the last thing that was sent to them. You can decide what columns you want to see here. And if I run this filter, let's see what I get for results. Let me save this filter. Am I getting, there's so 109 closed requests as a result. You can see these would be the columns in my CSV effectively. And if I went here to options, I could just get a CSV export of that. So it's not a report exactly, but if you need a report or an export or some kind of data, of data in that way that shows you, and you want to be able to have really fine-grained control over what appears in those columns, oftentimes using the CSV export out of a filter is the best way to do that. So yeah, all right, good. Michael saw that. Okay, we are at time, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining Ian and I. Really appreciate it. We'll go ahead and we'll send a recording out to everybody who's on the call, as well as everybody who signed up. And if you have any other questions about using HelpSpot, whether it's the admin side or anything else, please don't hesitate to let us know. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate you joining us, and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks everybody.